The salvage ship drifted through the debris field like a metal insect picking through ancient bones. Hannah pressed her face against the viewport, watching chunks of unidentified alloy tumble past in the eternal silence of space. She had been working on Captain Kyung's crew for 3 months now, and the work was tedious but honest. Better than the factory jobs back on New Bizen, at least. See anything worth grabbing? Kyung's voice crackled through her helmet speaker. The old captain had been running salvage operations for 20 years, and he could spot valuable scrap from kilometers away. Hana adjusted her scanner, sweeping it across the debris. Most of it was worthless, the usual collection of burned-out satellite parts and old mining equipment. Then something caught her eye. A sphere, maybe 3 meters across, perfectly smooth and dark as obsidian. It didn't match anything in the debris field around it. "Captain, I've got something strange here. Sending you the coordinates." Within an hour, they had pulled the sphere into the cargo bay. It sat on the metal floor like a giant pearl, reflecting nothing. Hana circled it slowly, running her gloved hand across its surface. It was completely seamless, as if it had been carved from a single piece of material. No welds, no panels, no obvious way to open it. "Probably some rich person's art project," Kyung muttered, though his eyes showed interest. "But the material alone might be worth something. Start cataloging it." Hannah pulled out her tools and began the standard examination. She took measurements, ran spectral analysis, tested its density. Nothing worked quite right. Her instruments gave conflicting readings or no readings at all. Frustrated, she pressed harder with her cutting tool, trying to get a sample of the surface material. The blade slipped. It happened so fast that Hana barely felt it. The tool skidded across the sphere's surface and sliced through her glove, cutting deep into her palm. Blood welled up immediately, bright red drops floating in the low gravity of the cargo bay. One drop touched the sphere. The reaction was instant. The black surface rippled like water, and suddenly light blazed from within. Hana stumbled backward as symbols appeared on the sphere's surface, flowing and changing in a language she couldn't read. The cargo bay filled with a low humming sound that she felt in her bones rather than heard with her ears. "What did you do?" Kyung shouted, rushing into the bay. But Hannah couldn't answer. She was transfixed by what was happening before her eyes. The sphere was opening, peeling back like a flower, revealing a crystalline core that pulsed with inner light. Holographic images spilled out into the air around them, showing star maps and what looked like ships, massive beyond comprehension. Then the sphere began transmitting. Hana could see the energy pulse leave it, shooting out into deep space like an invisible arrow. Her instruments screamed warnings as every sensor on the salvage ship tried to track the signal and failed. The transmission lasted exactly 17 seconds. Then the sphere went dark again, sealing itself back into its perfect black shell. But something had changed. Hana could feel it, a strange awareness at the back of her mind, like someone had opened a door in a room she didn't know existed. The coalition arrived 3 days later. Ships from a dozen different species surrounded Kyung's small salvage vessel, their weapons powered but not yet aimed. Hana found herself in a sterile white room aboard a coalition flagship, facing a panel of officials who looked at her with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. They had tried everything to replicate what happened. Scientists from the Vextar brought their best engineers. The aquatic Cauldrith offered their geneticists. Even the mysterious Vorlin, who rarely spoke to other species, sent representatives. One by one, members of each species touched the sphere. Nothing happened. It remained cold and dead under their hands. Then Hana touched it again, and the sphere came alive like before. The holographic star maps appeared, more detailed this time. And in the center of it all, a message finally translated itself into language the coalition computers could understand. The sphere was a command key. It had been waiting for 5,000 years, left behind by a species called the progenitors. These ancient beings had built a fleet of warships, hundreds of vessels scattered across the galaxy, each one powerful enough to destroy planets. The fleet had been designed to fight something called the Devourers, creatures that consumed entire star systems. The Devourers had been defeated once, driven back into the dark spaces between galaxies. But the progenitors had known they would return. So they built the fleet and programmed it to wait, to sleep until the day the threat came back. They had meant to designate an inheritor species, someone to command the fleet when it was needed. But the progenitors had vanished before completing that final step. Somehow, humanity carried the genetic marker the fleet was waiting for. Hana's blood had activated the command sphere because she was human. Only humans could wake the ancient ships. The room fell silent when the translation finished. Hana looked at the faces around her, seeing the implications sink in. Every species in the coalition was older than humanity, more advanced, more established. But this ancient power responded only to humans. The political ramifications were staggering. Then the worst news came. Long-range sensors, ancient devices the progenitors had hidden in dead star systems, had detected something. The Devourers were coming back. They were 6 months away, maybe less. Without the fleet, the coalition would fall. Billions would die across hundreds of worlds. Hana's brother Day arrived on the 4th day. He wore his coalition military uniform, and his face was tight with worry. "Tell them no," he said quietly when they were finally alone. "Tell them to find someone else." But there was no one else. Hana looked at her bandaged hand, feeling that strange awareness still humming at the back of her mind. She thought about her parents, who had died in a mining accident saving their co-workers. She thought about all the people on New Bizon, on Earth, on the hundreds of human colonies scattered across space. She thought about the other species, too. The Vextar and the Cauldrith and all the others who had welcomed humanity into the galactic community. "I'll do it," she told the coalition officials the next morning. "I'll wake your fleet." The decision was made. Within a week, they had assembled a crew and prepared a ship. Hana would travel to each location where the ancient fleet waited, and she would wake the ships one by one. It should have been simple. Touch the ship, activate it, move to the next one. But nothing about the progenitors was ever simple. And Hana was about to discover that waking ancient gods came with a price that no one had anticipated. The mission ship departed from coalition space on a cold morning, heading toward the first coordinates the sphere had provided. Hana stood in the observation deck, watching the stars stream past as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. Her hand still ached where she had cut it, and in her mind, that strange new awareness pulsed like a second heartbeat, waiting for something she couldn't yet name. Behind her, the command sphere sat in a secured cargo hold, silent now, but not sleeping. It knew what was coming. The ancient fleet was stirring in the darkness between stars, feeling the call of its long-awaited commander. The girl who would wake them had no idea what she was about to become. The Ashmark system looked dead from orbit. 3 planets circled a dying red star, and only one showed any signs it had once held life. Ancient cities lay in ruins on its surface, their builders long gone. Somewhere in that graveyard of a world, an ancient warship waited. Captain Myung stood beside Hana on the bridge, studying the scanner readings. She was a veteran of the coalition military, gray-haired and serious, chosen to lead this mission because she understood both the stakes and the politics. The ship is in orbit around the second planet. Sensors show it's 3 kilometers long. That's bigger than anything we've ever built. Hana felt that awareness in her mind growing stronger as they approached. It was like a sleeping presence, vast and old, beginning to stir. She pressed her hand against the viewport, and for a moment, she could have sworn she felt the ancient ship reaching back toward her across the empty space between them. G1. The Vextar scientist chittered excitedly from her station. Her insectoid body was built for precision work, and she had spent the entire journey studying every scrap of data about the progenitors. The readings are incredible. That ship's power core is still functional after 5,000 years. The technology involved is beyond anything we understand. Let's hope it still remembers how to fight, Inho said quietly. The Caldrith diplomat's aquatic suit bubbled softly as he moved. He had been tasked with keeping the coalition informed of their progress, a job that grew harder each day as political tensions increased back home. They took a shuttle across to the ancient ship. Bora piloted them with casual skill, weaving between chunks of orbital debris with the same reckless confidence she applied to everything. She caught Hannah's nervous expression and grinned. "Relax, I never crashed a shuttle on a Tuesday before." "What day is it?" Hannah asked. "Tuesday." Despite everything, Hannah laughed. Bora had that effect on people. She made even the impossible seem manageable. The ancient ship's hull was pitted and scarred from millennia in space, but it was still intact. They found an airlock that opened at their approach, as if the ship recognized that its new commander had arrived. Inside, the corridors were vast and empty, lit by soft blue light that activated as they passed. The command chamber was at the heart of the ship. It was a circular room dominated by a throne-like seat made of the same crystalline material as the sphere. Hannah approached it slowly, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Everyone else held back, weapons ready in case something went wrong. When Hannah sat down, the ship came alive. It wasn't gradual. One moment the ship was dead metal and crystal. The next, every system surged to full power. Lights blazed throughout the vessel. Engines that had been cold for 5,000 years began to hum. Weapons arrays extended from the hull like the spines of some vast creature. And in Hannah's mind, the connection exploded. She could feel everything. Every sensor on the ship was suddenly hers to perceive through. She could sense the stellar radiation from the dying sun, could track the smallest pieces of debris in orbit, could feel the power flowing through conduits deep in the ship's structure. The ship had a name, she realized. It called itself Dawn's Edge, and it had been waiting so very long. Then the weight of it all crashed down on her. It was too much information, too much awareness. Her human brain trying to process inputs designed for something far beyond human consciousness. Hannah screamed, but the sound seemed to come from far away. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Day running toward her, his face twisted with fear. She woke up 2 days later in the medical bay. Her brother sat beside her bed, and he looked like he hadn't slept the entire time. "The doctors say you're okay," he said, but his voice was shaky. "They say your brain was just overwhelmed by the neural feedback." Hannah tried to sit up and immediately felt dizzy. But it wasn't normal dizziness. It was like part of her was somewhere else, still connected to something vast and waiting. "I can still feel it," she whispered. The ship. Dawn's Edge. It's in my mind now. Ji-Won entered the medical bay, her compound eyes reflecting concern. "We've run extensive scans. The connection between you and the ship is permanent. There's a neural pathway that wasn't there before, linking your brain to the ship's systems. Every time you activate a ship, you create another link." "How many ships are there?" Hannah asked, though she already knew the answer from the command sphere's data. 247, Ji-Won said quietly. "If you activate them all, you'll have 247 permanent neural connections. We don't know what that will do to a human mind." Day stood up abruptly. "Then we stop. We find another way." But Hannah had seen the data on the Devourers. She had accessed it through her new connection to Dawn's Edge, diving into the ancient ship's memory banks. She had seen what those creatures did to living worlds, how they consumed everything, breaking down matter itself to fuel their endless hunger. The progenitors had thrown everything they had against the Devourers and had barely won. Without the fleet, the Coalition had no chance. "I have to continue," she said. Over the next 2 months, they traveled from system to system. Hannah awakened 9 more ships, cruisers bristling with weapons, carriers designed to launch smaller attack craft, support vessels with repair systems more advanced than anything the Coalition possessed. Each awakening was agony, each new neural link a burden added to her mind. But each time, Hannah forced herself through it. The connections changed her. She started thinking in patterns that weren't quite human. Mathematical concepts she had never studied suddenly made sense because the ships understood them and shared that understanding through the neural links. She could feel the vessels even when she was far away, a constant awareness of their positions and status humming in the background of her thoughts. Bora noticed the changes first. They were sharing a meal in the ship's small galley when Bora suddenly put down her fork and said, "You're disappearing." Hannah looked up, confused. "I'm right here." "No, I mean the real you. The Hannah who used to joke about boys and complain about the quality of ship coffee. She's fading. Every time you wake up another ship, a little bit more of her is gone." Hannah wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. She had been having moments where she forgot she was human, where she thought of her body as just another system to maintain, like the ship's engines or weapons. Sometimes she caught herself analyzing social interactions in terms of efficiency and optimal outcomes, rather than as connections between people. "I don't know how to stop it," she admitted. Bora reached across the table and took her hand. "Then I'll help you remember. That's what friends do." The political situation on the Coalition homeworlds was deteriorating rapidly. News feeds showed protests, some peaceful but others turning violent. Anti-human sentiment was growing as fear spread. A faction called the Sovereignty League was gaining power, arguing that humanity couldn't be trusted with control of the ancient fleet. Inho tried to manage the situation, sending diplomatic messages and attempting to calm tensions. But his efforts seemed futile against the rising tide of fear. "They're not entirely wrong to be afraid," he told the crew during one tense briefing. "Humans are a young species. Now suddenly you have access to weapons that could destroy any Coalition fleet. It changes the balance of power completely." Captain Myung was more pragmatic. "Fear or not, the Devourers don't care about politics. They'll consume every species equally. We need the fleet operational." They were en route to the Karnak system, where a battleship-class vessel waited when everything went wrong. 3 Coalition ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path. But these ships had their weapons armed and targeting systems locked. "This is Commander Tiemann of the Sovereignty League." A voice crackled over the communications channel. "Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. The human will be taken into protective custody for the safety of the Coalition." Captain Myung's response was immediate. "This is a sanctioned Coalition mission. Stand down immediately." "The Coalition you serve no longer exists," Tiemann replied. "We are the new authority. Surrender the human or be fired upon." Hannah felt Dawn's edge in her mind, distant but ready. She could call it here, could command it to protect them. But that would mean a battle between Coalition forces, exactly the kind of division that would doom them all when the Devourers arrived. Before she could decide, Captain Myung made the choice for her. "Bora, get us out of here. Emergency jump. Any direction, now." The ship lurched as Bora pushed the engines beyond safe limits. Space twisted around them as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. But the League ships followed, and their weapons were faster. Energy beams struck the mission ship's engines just the jump engaged. The universe screamed. The damaged engines couldn't maintain the jump properly. They dropped back into normal space in an uncharted system, the ship tumbling and burning. Alarms wailed throughout the vessel, and Captain Myung lay on the bridge deck, her body broken by a falling support beam. She died with Day holding her hand, her last words a whisper to Hana. Finish it. Wake the fleet. Save them all. The ship limped toward the nearest planet while Hana sat in the damaged medical bay, feeling each of the 10 ships she had awakened burning in her mind. They could feel her grief, her rage, her determination, and somewhere in her thoughts, beneath the pain and the fear, a terrible understanding was forming. The Coalition, Taiwan Drift, was a region of space that most ships avoided. Gravitational anomalies from collapsed stars made navigation dangerous, and sensor readings were unreliable at best. But it was also independent territory, controlled by human colonies that had never fully joined the coalition. It was the only safe harbor left. Day now commanded the damaged mission ship. He had never wanted the responsibility, but Captain Myung's death had left him no choice. He sat in the command chair, looking older than his 30 years, while repair crews worked frantically to fix the critical systems to sovereignty. League had damaged. Hana spent most of her time alone. The neural connections to the 10 awakened ships pulled at her constantly now, a chorus of voices in her mind that never stopped. She could feel Dawn's Edge patrolling the outer edge of the drift, its weapons ready. She could sense each of the other 9 ships taking up defensive positions. They were waiting for her orders, waiting to protect her. And that awareness was both comforting and terrifying. Bora found her in the observation deck 3 days after they arrived at the drift. You need to eat something. You're starting to look like one of your ships, all angular and hollow. I'm not hungry. That's not true. Your body is hungry. You're just too busy being connected to 247 potential neural links to notice. Bora sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. The physical contact felt strange to Hana now, too immediate and too real compared to the vast awareness of the ships. 247, Hana repeated. I've only awakened 10 so far, and I can barely hold on to myself. How am I supposed to manage 247? Maybe you're not supposed to manage them all at once, Bora said carefully. Maybe the progenitors never intended one person to activate the entire fleet. Maybe there was supposed to be a whole species of them sharing the load. It was a thought that had occurred to Hana as well. But there was only one human who could activate the ships, and that was her. Unless there were others like her, hidden among the billions of humans spread across the galaxy. The Coalition scientists were testing for the genetic marker now, but so far, she was unique. Inho interrupted them with news from the Coalition. It's worse than we thought. The Sovereignty League has declared itself the legitimate government. 3 species have joined them completely, and 5 others are wavering. They're calling you a threat to galactic security, Hana. There are bounties being offered. And the real coalition? Day asked, joining them in the observation deck. Fragmented? Some species are trying to hold things together, but without unity, they have no real power. The League controls the most military assets now. Inho's aquatic suit bubbled with agitation. There have been attacks on human settlements. Nothing large-scale yet, but people are dying. Hana felt something cold settle in her chest. They're blaming humans for the devourers? Fear makes people irrational. The League is using that fear, directing it toward humanity. If they can make humans the enemy, they can unite the frightened species under their banner. Inho looked tired, his normally calm demeanor cracking. I've spent my entire career building bridges between species, and now I'm watching it all collapse. Jiwan entered, carrying datapads covered in calculations. I've been analyzing the remaining ships we need to activate. The process is going to get harder. The larger ships require deeper connections, more integration between your mind and their systems. And there's the flagship. She pulled up a holographic display showing a vessel so massive it dwarfed everything else. The progenitor records call it the Eternal Morning. It's 30 kilometers long and serves as the command nexus for the entire fleet. If you can activate it and link it to the other ships, they'll function as a networked consciousness. The tactical capabilities would be unlike anything that's ever existed. What's the survival rate? Day asked bluntly. Jiwan's compound eyes flickered. For full integration with the flagship? Less than 30%. The neural load would be catastrophic. No, they said immediately. We'll find another way. But Hannah was barely listening. She was feeling the ships in her mind, those 10 vessels and the pull of all the others still sleeping. They were designed for this. The progenitors had built them knowing that activation would require sacrifice. The entire fleet was a weapon forged from the progenitor's own consciousness, and it demanded the same commitment from whoever wielded it. Over the following weeks, more refugees poured into the Taiwan Drift, humans fleeing the violence that was spreading across coalition space. They came in small ships and mining vessels and anything that could travel. Hannah watched them arrive and felt the weight of responsibility crush down even harder. These were her people, and they were being hunted because of a power she had never asked for. But she kept working. She had Bora pilot her to the next coordinates, surrounded by a protective formation of the Awaken ships. Each new activation was agony. Each new neural connection took something from her. She awakened cruisers and carriers, support vessels, and attack frigates. The fleet grew, assembling in the Taiwan Drift like pieces of an ancient puzzle coming together. The ships changed her more with each connection. She started losing time, moments where her consciousness was entirely merged with the fleet and her body moved on autopilot. She would wake up to find herself somewhere different, with no memory of how she got there. Her speech patterns shifted, becoming more precise and less emotional. She calculated probabilities in her head without thinking about it, analyzing combat scenarios and tactical formations, even when there was no threat present. Bora tried to keep her grounded. They established a routine where Bora would ask Hannah questions about their shared past, forcing her to remember specific moments, specific feelings. Do you remember the first time we met? Bora would ask, and Hannah would struggle to pull that memory forward, fighting through the vast data networks in her mind to find that one small human moment. She did remember, eventually. They had met at a transport station, both waiting for delayed ships. Bora had been eating some terrible station food and complaining loudly about the quality. She had made Hannah laugh, and they had talked for 3 hours about nothing important. It was such a simple memory, but holding on to it felt like clutching a lifeline in a storm. The Devourers arrived early. Long-range sensors detected them 3 months ahead of the predicted schedule. The first reports came from the Outer Rim colonies, and they were horrifying. Entire planets going silent within days. Stations sending desperate messages that cut off mid-transmission. Ships that went to investigate and never returned. The coalition fell into chaos. Species blamed each other. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to flee to distant galaxies. The Sovereignty League used the panic to tighten their control, offering protection to those who submitted to their authority. And all the while, the Devourers drew closer, an unstoppable tide consuming everything in their path. Hannah had awakened 173 ships when Jiwan came to her with a proposal. The flagship is in the Abyss, a region near the galaxy's edge. If we go there now, if you can activate it and complete the neural network, the fleet will be ready when the Devourers reach the inner systems. What are the odds I survive the activation? Hannah asked. 30%. Maybe less. The neural integration required is total. You won't just be connected to the flagship. You'll be connected to all 173 ships simultaneously, plus the remaining vessels once they activate. Your consciousness will be distributed across the entire fleet. Day overheard the conversation and intervened immediately. Absolutely not. We'll find another way to coordinate the fleet. Manual communications, relay systems, anything but this. There isn't time, Hana said quietly. The Devourers will be here in weeks. We need the fleet at full capacity, and we need it coordinated perfectly. Individual ships fighting alone won't be enough. I don't care. I'm not losing you too. Day's voice cracked. Mom and Dad died. Captain Young died. I've watched you disappear piece by piece into these machines. When does it end? Hana looked at her brother, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. She saw the grief etched into his face, the fear behind his anger. Part of her, the part that was still human, wanted to comfort him. But another part, the part that was already more fleet than girl, was calculating probabilities and running combat scenarios. It ends when we win, she said finally. Or when there's nothing left to save. That night, Bora came to her quarters and simply held her while Hana cried. They didn't talk about the mission or the flagship or the chances of survival. They just existed together in that small space. Two friends facing the impossible. The journey to the abyss took 5 days. The Awaken fleet traveled with them, a formation of ships that stretched across thousands of kilometers. They looked magnificent and terrible. Ancient weapons stirred from their long sleep and ready for war. And at the center of it all, Hana felt herself becoming something else, something other than human. The person she had been was fading like a ghost in sunlight, replaced by something vast and cold and determined. The eternal morning waited in the darkness between dying stars. When Hana saw it for the first time, even through the neural static in her mind, she felt awe. The eternal morning was a city unto itself. Corridors stretched for kilometers in every direction, wide enough to drive vehicles through. The walls pulsed with soft blue light that seemed to respond to Hana's presence, brightening as she passed. The ship was welcoming her, recognizing its commander even before the formal activation. Hana walked along through the vast emptiness. She had insisted on it, despite Day's protests and Bora's concern. This was something she had to face by herself. Behind her, far back at the airlock, her crew waited. She could feel their worry even without turning around. The command chamber was at the heart of the ship, a journey that took nearly an hour even walking quickly. Hana passed through rooms filled with technology she couldn't name, weapon systems that hummed with dormant power, and strange crystalline structures that might have been computers or might have been something else entirely. The progenitors had built beyond human comprehension. The chamber itself was circular and vast, easily 100 meters across. At its center stood the neural throne, but it was nothing like the seats in the smaller ships. This was a full immersion pod, a crystalline sphere filled with luminescent fluid. Tubes and cables extended from it like veins, connecting to systems throughout the massive ship. Hana approached slowly. Her hands were shaking. The neural connections she already had, those 173 voices in her mind, were singing with anticipation. They knew what was about to happen. They had been waiting 5,000 years for this moment. She climbed into the pod. The fluid was warm and strangely thick, supporting her body as she settled into position. The moment she was fully submerged, the pod sealed itself. Panic flared briefly as the fluid covered her face, but she could still breathe somehow. The substance was oxygenated, designed to sustain life while the neural connection formed. The activation began. It wasn't like the other times. Those had been painful but brief, a sudden connection that overwhelmed and then stabilized. This was total. This was absolute. Hana felt her consciousness expand, spreading out from her physical body like ink in water. The boundaries of self began to dissolve. She was Hana, 19 years old from New Bizen, scared and determined and trying desperately to hold on to who she was. She was Dawn's Edge. patrolling the outer perimeter, weapons charged and sensors sweeping for threats. She was the eternal morning, waking after millennia of sleep, vast and ancient and hungry for purpose. She was 173 ships simultaneously, each one a distinct presence, but all connected through her consciousness like fingers on a hand. The sensation was overwhelming. Hannah tried to scream, but she had no mouth anymore. Or rather, she had thousands of mouths, communication systems on ships scattered across multiple star systems. She tried to close her eyes, but she had millions of sensors instead of eyes, perceiving reality in wavelengths human eyes had never been designed to see. Time fractured. Seconds became eternities as her enhanced consciousness processed information at speeds biological brains never could. She experienced the past, present, and future simultaneously as tactical computers ran probability scenarios spanning years in the space of heartbeats. Then, in that moment of total dissolution, Hannah encountered them. The progenitors. Not alive, not exactly. But their consciousness had been preserved in the fleet systems, fragments of what they had been, encoded into the very structure of the ships. They had done this deliberately, had transformed themselves into the operating system of their greatest weapon because they knew it would need more than simple programming to fight the DEVOURERs. The progenitors showed her the truth. They had been a young species once, full of hope and curiosity, reaching out to explore the galaxy. Then they had encountered the Devourers, and everything changed. The creatures weren't natural. They had been created as weapons by a civilization so ancient that even the progenitors had only found ruins and warnings. That long-dead civilization had destroyed itself in a war beyond comprehension, and they had left behind their ultimate weapon, designed to consume everything it encountered. The Devourers couldn't be reasoned with. They had no consciousness in any meaningful sense, just an endless hunger programmed into their very cells. They existed to consume, to break down matter into its component atoms and use that energy to create more of themselves. They were a plague that could strip a galaxy bare given enough time. The progenitors had fought them for 100 years. They had lost world after world, watching their civilization crumble as the Devourers consumed everything. In desperation, they had done the unthinkable. They had converted their entire species into the fleet, sacrificing their physical forms to create weapons powerful enough to drive the Devourers back. It had worked, barely. The Devourers had been pushed to the edge of the galaxy and into the dark spaces beyond. But the progenitors knew they would return. Evolution would find a way. So they had programmed the fleet to wait, to watch, and to respond when the threat came back. They had searched for an inheritor species, someone to command the fleet when it was needed again. They had found markers in humanity's DNA, specific sequences that matched the keys they had left behind. It wasn't that humans were special or chosen. It was simply that human genetics happened to align with the recognition protocols the progenitors had designed. A cosmic coincidence that had determined the fate of the galaxy. Hannah understood it all in an instant that stretched for subjective years. And in understanding it, she also understood what she had to become. The fleet needed a mind that could coordinate across vast distances, that could process tactical data from hundreds of sources simultaneously, that could make decisions faster than any biological brain could manage. It needed someone willing to sacrifice their humanity to become something more. The choice had already been made the moment she stepped into the pod. But now Hannah made it consciously, accepting what she would lose and what she would become. Her consciousness completed its integration with the eternal morning. The full network activated, linking all 173 ships into a single coordinated entity. And at the center of it all, Hannah existed, distributed across the entire fleet, but anchored to her body in the pod. She opened her eyes, all million of them, and saw the galaxy with perfect clarity. She could perceive every ship in the fleet, feel their status, direct their movements with thought instead of commands. She could see the Devourers approaching, still weeks away, but visible now to her enhanced sensors. And she could feel the remaining ships of the fleet, still dormant across dozens of star systems, waiting for her to call them. With a thought, she activated them all simultaneously. The remaining vessels woke across the galaxy, their systems surging to life at her command. They began moving, drawn by her consciousness like moths to flame, converging on the Taiwan Drift where the rest of the fleet waited. 247 ships. The full might of the progenitor fleet, awakened and ready for war. And Hannah, at the center of it all, neither fully human nor fully machine, but something entirely new. Back in the real world, in the small space of the command chamber, Bora had followed Hannah despite orders to stay behind. She stood outside the pod, watching the fluid swirl with inner light, watching monitors displaying neural patterns that looked nothing like human brain activity anymore. "Come back," Bora whispered, pressing her hand against the pod's surface. "Please, Hannah, come back." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Hannah's voice emerged from the ship's communication systems, but it was wrong. It was her voice, but layered with harmonics, as if dozens of people were speaking in perfect unison. "I'm here. I'm everywhere. I'm the fleet." A pause, and when the voice came again, it sounded more like Hannah, more human. "I'm still me, Bora. Part of me is still me." "How much?" Bora asked, tears streaming down her face. "Enough," Hannah replied. "Enough to remember why I'm doing this. Enough to care about saving everyone." The fleet was gathering. Ships materialized from faster than light travel, taking up positions in the precise formation Hannah's distributed consciousness had designed. It was beautiful and terrible, a display of coordinated power that made human naval exercises look like children playing with toys. Hannah could feel Day on the mission ship, his fear and grief mixing with reluctant pride. She could feel Inho desperately trying to communicate what was happening to what remained of the coalition government. She could feel Jiwan studying the data in awe and horror. And she could feel Bora standing beside the pod, refusing to leave. Most of all, she could feel the Devourers. They were closer now, close enough that her sensors could count them. Billions upon billions of individual organisms, each one the size of a city, connected by a hive intelligence that spanned light years. They had detected the fleet's activation, and they were accelerating, eager to consume this new threat. Hannah began formulating her plan. She had had access to 5,000 years of tactical data from the progenitors' war. She had probability engines that could model combat scenarios faster than thought. She had weapons that could crack planets and shields that could deflect stars. But she also had something the progenitors hadn't possessed in their final battle. She had humanity. And humanity, she was discovering, had taught the cold logic of the fleet something unexpected. It had taught her to value individual lives, even while calculating mass casualty. Thea came like a living darkness, blotting out the stars. The Devourers emerged from deep space in numbers that defied comprehension. Hannah perceived them through 1,000,000 sensors across her fleet, and even with her enhanced consciousness distributed across 247 ships, the scale was overwhelming. Each creature was enormous, organic masses the size of cities, their bodies made of matter consumed from 1,000 dead worlds. They moved with terrible purpose, their hive intelligence coordinating billions of individual organisms into a single, unstoppable force. The coalition forces positioned around Hannah's ancient fleet looked pathetically small in comparison. Thousands of ships against billions of creatures. But they held their positions, waiting for her command. Hannah felt Bora's hand pressed against the pod in the command chamber of the Eternal Morning. That small point of human contact helped her maintain focus. kept her from dissolving completely into the vast tactical awareness that now defined her existence. "First wave incoming," she transmitted across all channels, her voice carrying through coalition and ancient fleets simultaneously. "All vessels weapons free. Engage at maximum range." The battle began. Space lit up with weapons fire. The ancient fleet's guns spoke with fury that hadn't been unleashed in 5,000 years. Energy beams that could boil oceans lanced out across millions of kilometers. Kinetic projectiles, accelerated to relativistic speeds, turned individual devourers into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Missiles that the progenitors had designed specifically for this enemy struck with precision, their warheads converting matter directly into energy. The devourers died by the thousands, but thousands more pressed forward, adapting with horrifying speed. Hana watched through her distributed consciousness as the creatures evolved in real time, their bodies shifting to develop reflective surfaces against energy weapons, ablative armor against kinetic strikes. The hive intelligence was learning, becoming more efficient with every passing second. The coalition forces added their firepower to the ancient fleet's assault. Ships from a dozen species fired in coordinated volleys, following the targeting data Hana transmitted to them. They coordinated the human vessels with practiced efficiency, his voice steady over the command channel, even as death bloomed in the darkness around them. The devourers reached the outer defensive line. The fighting became desperate, as coalition ships found themselves in direct combat with creatures that dwarfed them. A Vexstar cruiser disappeared into the mass of a particularly large devourer, consumed in seconds. A human destroyer managed to detonate its reactor at point-blank range, taking out dozens of creatures but vaporizing itself in the process. Hana felt every death like a knife cut. The neural connections to her fleet gave her a horrifying clarity, allowing her to witness each ship's destruction, each crew's final moments. The human part of her wanted to weep. The part that was now the fleet calculated casualties and adjusted tactics. "All forces, fall back to secondary positions," she commanded. "Ancient fleet vessels Dawn's Edge, Morning Star, and Eternal Vigil. Advance and cover the retreat." 3 of her ships, cruiser-class vessels bristling with weapons, surged forward into the teeth of the Devourer swarm. Their shields flared brilliant blue as they absorbed impacts from the creature's organic weapons. They fired constantly, creating a killing field that allowed the coalition vessels to withdraw in relatively good order. The battle raged for 3 hours. The Devourers pushed forward relentlessly, absorbing losses that would have broken any conventional army. Hana directed her fleet with precision born of her enhanced consciousness, coordinating attacks across multiple star systems, predicting enemy movements nanoseconds before they happened, exploiting every weakness her tactical computers could identify. But it wasn't enough. The Devourers were adapting too quickly. For every weakness Hana exploited, they evolved a counter. For every tactic she employed, they developed a response. The hive intelligence was vast, encompassing billions of organisms. And it was learning from the progenitor's own tactics encoded in the fleet's battle computers. "They're going to break through." Jiwan's voice crackled over the command channel, stating what everyone already knew. "At current casualty rates, we can't hold them." Hana had known this moment was coming. She had seen it in the probability calculations, in the tactical models that her distributed consciousness could process faster than human thought. Conventional warfare wouldn't be enough. She needed to implement the plan she had developed, the one that would either save everything or destroy it all. "All coalition forces, begin falling back to the Taiwan Drift," she commanded. "Ancient fleet will cover your withdrawal. Prepare for final defensive positions around the gravitational anomalies." "Huh? What are you planning?" Day asked, and she could hear the fear in his voice. He knew her well enough to recognize when she was about to do something desperate. The same thing the progenitors tried 5,000 years ago, she replied. But with one difference. They failed because they ran out of time. I'm not going to let that happen. The coalition fleet began its organized retreat, fighting a running battle as they fell back toward the Taiwan Drift. The ancient fleet formed a rear guard, systematically destroying devourers by the tens of thousands. But the creatures kept coming, an endless tide of hunger and destruction. 30 of Hana's ships were destroyed in the first phase of the withdrawal. She felt each one die, felt the neural connections sever like amputations. The pain was extraordinary, but she couldn't stop to process it. There would be time for grief later. If there was a later, the coalition forces reached the Taiwan Drift and took up positions around the gravitational anomalies, the collapsed stars that made this region of space so dangerous. The devourers followed, drawn by the concentration of mass and energy. They flowed into the drift like a flood, billions of creatures filling the space between worlds. It was exactly what Hana needed. All ships, activate gravitational anchors and brace for impact, she commanded. Then, through the Eternal Morning's primary weapon system, she initiated the sequence that would either save them or kill them all. The progenitors had built the world, Splitter as a weapon of last resort. It was a device that could destabilize stellar remnants and weaponize the resulting gravitational cascade. The collapsed stars in the Taiwan Drift were perfect targets. Massive enough to create the effect, but unstable enough to be triggered. The world, Splitter fired. Reality screamed. The 3 collapsed stars began to tear themselves apart. Gravitational waves rippled out from them, warping space and time itself. The devourers caught in the initial blast were torn to pieces, their organic bodies unable to withstand the fundamental forces being unleashed. The creatures further out tried to flee, but the gravitational anomalies trapped them, pulling them inexorably toward their destruction. Hundreds of millions of devourers died in seconds. The hive intelligence, for the first time in the battle, showed something that might have been fear. The surviving creatures began a chaotic retreat, trying to escape the gravitational trap, but the weapon's power came with a cost. The energy release was catastrophic, a stellar-scale explosion that threatened to consume everything in the region. Coalition ships that had been too close to the blast zone simply ceased to exist, vaporized instantly. Others were caught by the expanding shockwave, their shields collapsing under impossible strain. 12 of Hana's ancient ships were destroyed in the blast. The neural feedback was like having parts of her body torn away. She felt herself fragmenting, her consciousness struggling to maintain cohesion as the connection severed in the command chamber. Bora watched in horror as Hana's body convulsed in the pod, blood seeping from her nose and ears. The neural strain was killing her, burning out her brain as it tried to process the cascade of sensory overload from the dying ships. Hana! Bora screamed, but there was no response. Hana was somewhere else, spread across a dying fleet, experiencing multiple deaths simultaneously. Bora made a decision that would save everything. Without hesitation, she climbed into the pod with Hana, pushing into the crystalline fluid. The pod wasn't designed for 2 people, and Bora wasn't genetically compatible with the progenitor technology. The moment the fluid covered her, she felt agony beyond description as the neural interfaces tried and failed to connect with her nervous system. But she was there, physically present with Hana, and that mattered. Through the pain and the burning in her nerves, Bora reached out and found Hana's consciousness fragmenting in the vast network. She couldn't command the ships or access the tactical systems, but she could provide something the machines never could. She could remind Hana who she was. "Remember New Bizon," Bora whispered. Her words transmitted through the pod systems directly into Hana's distributed consciousness. "Remember complaining about ship coffee. Remember your parents. Remember being human." It was an anchor in the chaos. Hana's fragmenting consciousness found something to hold on to, a connection that was entirely human and entirely real. She pulled herself back together, sacrificing processing speed and tactical efficiency, but regaining cohesion. She was Hana again, not just a fleet, and that made all the difference. With Bora's help, Hana rallied.